I'm 74 years old, and I've spent half a century rehearsing a conversation with a ghost. Everything you've been told about father-son relationships is backwards. Society sells you this story that time heals, that distance creates perspective, that you'll understand your parents better once they're gone. It's a comforting lie, and I bought it. For 50 years I bought it. Here's what nobody tells you. Unresolved doesn't resolve itself. It just gets heavier. It calcifies. It becomes part of your architecture. I'm not here to impress you with wisdom I earned. I'm here because I wasted decades believing I had more time, and now I'm watching people around me make the same mistake. The urgency isn't for me anymore. It's for you. Because someone reading this right now is putting off a conversation that won't wait as long as you think it will. If this resonates, subscribe. I share one story like this every week, and I wish someone had shared them with me when I still had the chance to use them. For most of my adult life, I looked successful. Good career, respected in my field, paid my bills on time. Showed up where I was supposed to show up. My father died when I was 28, and I moved forward. That's what you do, right? You grieve, you process, you continue. Except I didn't process. I postponed. I filled my days with tasks that felt important. Meetings, deadlines, promotions, performance reviews, team lunches where everyone laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I told myself I was building something. A legacy, security, a life that mattered. But late at night, when the house was quiet and my wife was asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table with cold coffee and replayed the same scene. The hospital room, the beeping machines, his hand on the blanket, fingers slightly curled, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead, my mouth saying nothing, just standing there, waiting for him to speak first, waiting for permission to be honest. He died waiting too. And then later, much later, all the words I should have said, delivered to empty air, to the ceiling, to the darkness, to a man who couldn't hear me anymore. I wasn't living. I was performing life while the real me sat frozen at 28, holding a silence I never broke. The years stacked up. I got promoted, bought a bigger house, watched my kids grow, attended weddings and funerals, smiled in family photos. But underneath everything, there was this conversation I never had, playing on a loop, wearing a groove into my mind so deep I couldn't see past it. You know what's worse than grief? Grief mixed with regret. Grief you could have prevented. The pivot came on a Tuesday morning in March 14 years ago. I was at my desk, answering emails about quarterly projections. The office smelled like burnt coffee and recycled air. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. It was my daughter. Her voice had that particular tone you never want to hear from your child. Tight, controlled, scared trying not to sound scared. "Dad, can you come to the hospital?" "It's nothing serious," they said, "but I need you here." I grabbed my keys. Didn't tell anyone where I was going. Just left. I drove 40 minutes through morning traffic with my hands locked on the steering wheel. Every red light felt like an hour. Every slow driver felt like a personal attack. My mind went to the worst places. You know how it goes. You imagine the funeral, the phone calls you'd have to make, the hole in the world. She was fine. Minor heart palpitations, stress. They kept her for observation and sent her home the same day. But while I sat in that waiting room, staring at linoleum tiles and listening to the intercom call doctors to different wings, something cracked open inside me. I looked around, other people waiting, some crying, some staring at nothing. All of us suspended in this space between before and after. And I thought, what if I never told her what she means to me? What if I leave her with the same silence my father left me? What if she spends the next 50 years replaying conversations we never had? My hands were shaking, not from fear, from recognition. I was doing it again, assuming time, assuming tomorrow. And that's when I realized the lie I'd been living. The lie is simple, 3 words. I have time. I have time to call my brother back. I have time to plan that trip. I have time to say I'm sorry. I have time to explain. I have time to forgive. I have time to tell my children I'm proud of them. I have time to visit my mother before she forgets who I am. I have time to start the thing I've always wanted to start. I have time to fix what's broken. I have time to mean what I say. I have time to be honest. I have time to be vulnerable. I have time to stop hiding behind work and responsibilities and the person I think I'm supposed to be. The goalposts keep moving. First, it's after college. Then it's after I'm established. After I get married. After the kids are born. After they're in school. After they can sleep through the night. After the promotion. After the next promotion. After the mortgage is paid. After the economy stabilizes. After retirement. After I have energy again. After I feel ready. After things calm down. After the holidays. After summer. After I lose weight. After I feel less angry. After they apologize first. You never feel ready. And one day, time just stops offering. The math is brutal. If you're 30 and your parents are 60, you might have 30 years. Sounds like a lot, right? But subtract the years you're too busy, too distant, too proud, too hurt. Subtract the years they're declining. Subtract the years you're both pretending everything's fine. What's left? Maybe a handful of real conversations. Maybe none. When was the last time you said something that mattered to someone who matters? Not "I love you" as a reflex at the end of a phone call. I mean really said it. Looked them in the eye. Meant it with your whole chest. Said the specific thing. The thing that's hard to say. I had a colleague named Robert Sharp Guy. Worked in finance. Had a falling out with his son over something I never fully understood. Politics, maybe, or money. Or the way families fracture over accumulations of small slights that become mountains. Robert always said he'd fix it. When things calm down, he'd say. When he's ready to listen, he'd shake his head, frustrated, like his son was being unreasonable, like time was on his side. I'd see him sometimes, staring at his phone, typing messages he'd never send, deleting them, starting over. Robert died of a stroke at 61. Dropped dead in a parking lot outside a grocery store on a Saturday afternoon. Just gone. At his funeral, his son stood at the podium, 30-something, red eyes, shaking hands gripping the edges of the wood. He said, "I kept waiting for him to call. I thought we had time to fix it. I thought he'd reach out eventually. I thought I'd feel ready to forgive him. I thought wrong." That sentence followed me home. It sat in my passenger seat. It walked into my house. It lived in my chest for weeks, because I knew exactly what that son was feeling. And I knew I was doing the same thing to my own children. Maybe not a falling out, but a distance. A performance of closeness without the real thing. The important things left unsaid because saying them felt too vulnerable, too raw, too much like admitting I didn't have it all figured out. You want to know what I regret? Not the promotions I didn't get. Not the money I didn't make. Not the career moves I second-guessed. Not the investments that didn't pan out. Not the house I didn't buy. Not any of that. I regret the trip my father mentioned once, to see the coast where he grew up. And I said maybe next summer, because I was busy with a project at work that doesn't matter now and didn't matter then. There was no next summer. He died that fall. I regret never asking him what he was afraid of. I assumed I knew. The war. Failure. Letting us down. I didn't know anything. I never asked. I regret the night he tried to tell me about the war, and I changed the subject because it made me uncomfortable. He was trying to explain something about himself, about why he was the way he was, and I shut him down. He never brought it up again. I regret never asking about his childhood. His parents, what he wanted to be before life happened to him. I regret never saying thank you for the specific things. Not thanks for everything. Thanks for teaching me how to change a tire in the rain when I was 16. Thanks for not mocking me when I cried at my grandmother's funeral. Thanks for showing up to that play, even though you hated theater and your back was killing you. Thanks for working the job you hated so I could go to college. I regret not telling him I forgave him for the times he wasn't perfect. For the anger, for the silence, for the drinking, for missing things. for being human and flawed and doing the best he could with what he had. I held on to resentment like it was valuable. It wasn't. I regret not saying, "I love you," in a way that couldn't be misunderstood or brushed aside. Not as a formality, as a fact, as something I meant. I regret believing we'd have time later to be honest with each other, to drop the defenses, to talk like two grown men instead of father and son, locked in old roles we'd been performing since I was 5. I regret not asking if he was proud of me. I assumed he wasn't. Maybe he was. I'll never know. I regret not hugging him longer the last time I saw him. I was in a hurry. Always in a hurry. Somewhere to be. Someone to meet. Something more important. There was nothing more important. The rain hit the hospital window that last morning, and I watched the drops race each other down the glass. Instead of looking at him, I was afraid. Afraid of what I'd see. Afraid of what I'd feel. So I looked away. I regret that too. I regret the last words I said to him were about the weather. The weather. Like we were strangers in an elevator. And here's the thing that kills me. He probably had regrets too. Things he wanted to say. Things he wanted to ask. Apologies he wanted to make. But we were both waiting. Both afraid. Both assuming we had more time. We didn't. Here's the truth. And it's embarrassingly simple. Nothing matters as much as you think it does, except the people, the presence, the honesty, the moments you actually show up, not physically, but emotionally, really there, really listening, really willing to be seen. Everything else is noise. The career, the money, the status, the house, the car, the opinions of people who won't remember your name in 5 years. It's all noise. What changed for me? Small things, uncomfortable things. I started saying no to things that didn't matter, so I could say yes to things that did. I turned down a promotion that would have meant more travel. More money, less time. I said no. First time in my career I'd ever done that. I called my kids not when I had news, but just to hear their voices, just to ask how they were, really ask. And then listen, not plan my response while they talked. Actually listen. I told my wife out loud why I loved her. Specific reasons. Not the general "you're great" stuff. I told her about the morning I watched her with our daughter when she was sick, how gentle she was, how it made me understand what love actually looks like. I visited my mother every Sunday. Sometimes we just sat. I stopped needing the visits to be productive or meaningful. Sometimes she repeated the same story 3 times. I listened 3 times. I wrote letters to people I'd lost touch with, not to reconnect fully. Just to say, you mattered to me. You changed something in me. I'm sorry I let the silence grow. I protected my health like it was the only currency that counted, because it is. I started walking, cut back on drinking, went to the doctor. Not because I wanted to live forever. Because I wanted to be present for the time I had left. I stopped waiting to be inspired or ready or less busy. I just started. The book I always wanted to write. The garden I always wanted to plant. The guitar gathering dust in the closet. Not because I'd master them. Because doing them was the point. Because they made me feel alive. And I started having the hard conversations while people were still alive to hear them. I sat down with my brother. We hadn't spoken in 2 years over something so stupid I can't even remember what started it. I called him. I said, "I'm sorry. I don't want to waste any more time." He cried. I cried. Now we talk every week. I told my son about my father. About the regrets. About the silence. About the 50 years of replaying conversations that never happened. I didn't want him to carry that weight. I can't talk to my father now, but I can talk to my children. I can talk to my brother. I can talk to the people still here. 3 years ago, I sat my son down and told him everything I wished I'd said to my father. I told him I was proud of him. I told him I forgave him for the times we clashed. I told him I was sorry for the times I wasn't the father he needed. I told him I loved him, and I explained what I meant by that. What I loved about him specifically. It was awkward. He didn't know what to do with it at first. He cried. I cried. But now we don't carry the weight of things unsaid. When my time comes, he won't spend 50 years rehearsing a conversation with my ghost. That's my legacy. Not the career. Not the money. The honesty. You're reading this for a reason. Maybe there's someone in your life right now, someone you've been meaning to call, meaning to forgive, meaning to thank, meaning to be honest with. Someone you've been putting off because it feels hard or awkward, or like it can wait. It can't wait as long as you think. I'm not telling you to quit your job or abandon responsibility or chase some fantasy version of life where everything's perfect and easy. I'm telling you this. Say the thing. Make the call. Have the conversation. Today. Not when it's convenient. Not when you're ready. Not when they apologize first. Not when you've figured out the perfect words. Now. Messy. Imperfect. Real. Because one day you won't get another chance. And you'll spend the rest of your life wishing you had. You'll replay the conversation you never had. You'll write scripts in your head. You'll imagine what they would have said, what you should have said. And none of it will matter because they'll be gone. I know this because I've lived it. I'm still living it, but you don't have to. Leave a comment and tell me, what's the one conversation you've been putting off? Who do you need to call? What do you need to say? Share this if you know someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more of these stories. I've got a few years left, and I'm not wasting them on silence anymore. So what are you going to do with your time?